Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 54 of Diehlman at Halftime, the NBA podcast that tops all others. I'm your host, Larry Diehlman. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome aboard, and if you've been a loyal listener, welcome back. We have much to get to today and not a lot of time to do it. We have 5 sections that we'll get into: a general overview of the NBA this week, and our usual highlight, lowlight, random stat, and game of the week. Let's get to our content for the week, and if I sound a little weird today, I apologize. I am getting over a cold, but the show must go on. We were hit with terrible news on Thursday afternoon. San Antonio Spurs superstar Victor Wembanyama is being shut down for the season with a blood clot in his shoulder. Specifically, it's deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder. This issue was discovered after the All-Star game, and it's usually treated with blood-thinning medication. This diagnosis has had fans remembering Hall of Famer Chris Bosh. Bosh's career ended early in the mid-2010s due to a blood clot in his leg. New Toronto Raptors forward Brandon Ingram had a similar issue in 2019. But after being put on blood thinners and with doctors removing a portion of a rib, Ingram eventually returned and was a first-time All-Star and Most Improved Player with New Orleans. Fortunately, the Spurs believe their superstar will recover fully before next season. As of now, San Antonio is 4 games back for the final Western Conference play-in tournament seed. Thursday was also the day another player was announced to be sitting out for a while, for an entirely different reason. Milwaukee Bucks forward Bobby Portis has been suspended for 25 games for violating the NBA's anti-drug policy. Don't make assumptions, though. Portis took tramadol to treat severe pain. His agent said it was an accident. Portis' agent said he meant to take Toradol, not tramadol. Portis' assistant gave him the wrong medication by mistakenly telling him it was Toradol. This essentially knocks Portis out for the remainder of the regular season. The Little Rock, Arkansas native will not appeal the suspension. This episode is entitled Showtime. So, who's raising eyebrows at the moment? Let's go to our highlight, the Indiana Pacers. If you want a team that's fast-paced and full of offense, then the Indiana Pacers are the team for you. The Pacers are 32-24 and 5th in the Eastern Conference. Although Indiana didn't acquire a big piece this season like Pascal Siakam, who they got in January 2024, the Pacers are looking to improve from their Eastern Conference Finals appearance. Tyrese Halliburton has the keys to the Pacers offense, averaging 18.1 points, 8.7 assists, and 1.4 steals per night. He's been averaging at least 20 points and 10 assists over the past 2 seasons, but perhaps that hamstring injury suffered last year has been a nagging issue. The Pacers have a solid core of shooters around Halliburton, like Andrew Nembhard and Benedict Mathurin, and a second star in Siakam. In the paint, Miles Turner is a former 2-time NBA blocks leader. The main concern I have with Indiana is their defense and how that could translate into the playoffs. While their electric offense is top 10 in scoring, their points per game allowed is also top 10. I don't doubt they present problems to a team or two in the postseason, but they need to tighten things up defensively. Their next game is tomorrow, Wednesday, February 26th at 7 o'clock. They will host the Toronto Raptors. To get more insight into our highlight this week, we have our 8th guest on Diehlman at Halftime Season 2. Let's get into it. So for our 8th guest of Season 2 on the Diehlman at Halftime podcast, we welcome Austin Krell. Austin is a Sixers reporter for OnPattison.com. He has covered the Sixers since the 2020-2021 season. He has written about the NBA for USA Today Sports Media Group. Austin hosts a Sixers-centric podcast called The Feed to Embiid, and he has made appearances on 97.5 The Fanatic, 94.1 WIP, and 97.3 ESPN FM, among others. Austin, how are we doing today?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
So, Austin, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Indiana Pacers. They are our highlight for the week as they look to stay in the top four Eastern Conference seeds as we're coming out of the All-Star break. So, my first question for you, what was your reaction to the Pacers getting to the Eastern Conference Finals last season? They went against Boston, and Boston took care of them pretty easily. Were you impressed by their run, or was it more expected due to the other team's injuries?
So I think the funny thing about that is like the injuries happen so suddenly, and when they happen suddenly, you don't really have time to reflect or adjust your expectations. So, Brunson breaks his hand in the middle of game seven, and they're already having like an all-time shooting night or shooting day in game seven. Hart has his injuries. OG Anunoby is not right for that series. They lose Bojan Bogdanovic. So and in the first round, not to mention Mitch Robinson. So as one thing goes down, the two buffs or another for the Knicks, the Pacers are seeing their odds creep up, and their belief in themselves is expanding. So unexpected given the circumstances, not really. They played two teams that kind of lost the battle of natural selection, if you will, and they were rightfully and quite easily shown the door in the conference finals.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. That first round series against Milwaukee, they had beaten Milwaukee a couple times last season, so it's like, all right, cool. Then they had the Knicks. Honestly, I don't think Indiana or New York was getting past Boston. It was just Boston's year last year. They were taking care of everybody. We saw what they did to the Mavericks in the finals. So I think it was either way, the Celtics were going to win it all. But I think the Pacers made a good attempt. I mean, you play what's on your schedule. You don't just be like, well, the fans are going to hate us if we win because we played injured teams. No, you play them and you win. Okay, that's great. So it was definitely interesting to see them get to the Eastern Conference Finals early in their, I guess, run, if you will, since they just got Pascal Siakam at the time, too, and you have Tyrese Halliburton. So speaking of him, my next question, Tyrese Halliburton is usually among the NBA's leaders in assists per game. He's currently sixth. What makes him such a unique player? And at 24 years old, do you think we can see him be a consistent double-double threat, like 20 points, 10 assists roughly, for years to come?
Yeah, I think the league is. I think offense is far ahead of defense in the NBA these days. As some people would contend that defenses aren't like teams aren't playing defense. I would say, having covered my large share of games over the last 5 years, that I think it's simply that trainers are more abundant. Players are learning more about themselves and have more information about themselves, and so offense is just simply better. Talent is more abundant now, and Tyrese Halliburton is an example of that. With the pace that he and Indiana play with on a nightly basis, and his usage as an on-ball guard, and his gift, his vision, and his combination of leveraging shooting and getting downhill and sort of keeping guys off balance, and then breaking into the paint and kicking out. All those things lend it to belief that he can be a phenomenal 2010 guy for years to come, as long as he can get that hamstring 100% right. That was obviously something that hampered him for a non-insignificant portion of last season. And now that about a year removed, and he still had some moments where he hasn't been great. Whereas last year he was pretty much dominant all the way through up until that injury. As long as he can figure that hamstring out and stay healthy, he's a hell of a player, hell of talent, and there's no reason to believe that he, at his age, can't continue to ascend.
Right. Some good points there. He is really one of the more interesting players in the league. He started with the Kings, and then they got rid of him in the Sabonis trade, which has kind of worked in like a win-win type of deal. I mean, we could go back and forth about stats and, where the Pacers have been and where the Kings have been since that trade, but I think it was a
win-win for both sides because it allowed Fox and Sabonis, now Fox is in San Antonio, but it allowed them to thrive. It allowed Halliburton to get out of Fox's shadow. So I think it was definitely a good trade at the time, and now Halliburton is thriving, and I think he can be a great 20 and 10 roughly threat each night. And like you said, with the injury he suffered, some of his stats have been a little bit down this year, but I don't see any reason coming off an Eastern Conference Finals appearance why he can't come back to that form as well. So next, Indiana is in the league's top 10 in points per game, but they're also top 10 in points allowed per game. Does this current core have defensive minded players? Should they have explored options at the recently passed trade deadline? Is free agency or the draft more likely? Because you look at this roster right now, you have Halliburton, he's the franchise. You have Siakam, they acquired last year. That's great. Miles Turner has been there for a while. He's usually averaging about 2, 3 blocks a game. Great. Then they have going down the roster, you got Aaron Nesmith, you got Ben Shepherd, you got Andrew Nemhard. So some of these young guards and forwards. But do you think that they have a defensive minded core at the moment or anybody that's underrated defensively? Or do they just need to say, you know what, we need to start hitting trades or free agency or the draft?
So I think the trades thing is an interesting concept because there are a bunch of things that lead you into the belief that you have to, make significant moves at the deadline. And I think the way that teams operate is they're opportunistic, meaning that if there's a can't miss deal out there for them, they will certainly go for it. But also they have to act within the guidelines of their own team and their own situation. What I mean by that is how much pressure do they face internally from their own stars? Is Tyrese Halliburton 24 or is he 30, 31? Is he on an expiring deal or is he locked down for years to come? So there is pressure that organizations, whether they create themselves or because of the perception of time running out or players actually exerting pressure, those are all things that go into it. And I don't think you ever have to be ultra aggressive given where they are if you can help it, if you don't have those things internally that are driving you to be aggressive. So should they have explored options at the trade deadline? Depends on what's available to you. Always, it's a game of supply and demand. But defensively, like they are near the top of the league in pace, and so that inherently means they're playing faster. They're getting up a lot more shots. Their opponents are inherently getting up a lot more shots too because they're not using much shot clock. And so when you have a team like that, their defense is going to trend towards higher numbers defensively. So like they're not a great transition defense. They are somewhere in the middle of the pack defensively in the half court, just a little bit below average half court defense. The pieces they do have, like Nemhart's a good example of that. Halliburton, when he wants to be, is a good example of that. TJ McConnell, excellent example of that. They have got guards that can impact the ball, and that's a great currency in today's game, where you have point of attack defenders on the perimeter who can inhibit penetration, keep you away from the rim, narrow themselves out around screens, and then widen again to sort of keep in front and prevent turning the corner. They have an excellent rim protector in Miles Turner to fortify their back line of defense. So they do have the making, and they're probably a little small. They probably trend a little bit small, a little bit for the exception of Pascal Siakam, a little bit young on the wings in terms of their size in the middle between the bigs and the guards, but they do have a nice complement of defensive minded guards. They do have a very good defensive center in Miles Turner. This team should be a pretty good defensive team, but I just think the way that they operate philosophically, they're always going to trend towards giving up a lot of points because they're running so fast.
Yeah, an interesting point there with, like you said, with the overall pace, and you're going to be giving up more points because just because you're scoring a lot of points doesn't mean that, oh, we're going to be beating opponents by 30 points every night. No, I mean, you're going to be giving up a lot of points anyway. So good point there. And like you said, Miles Turner holding down the back lines and some of their young wings as well. So maybe that's kind of the next step they have to take in their development. So you have the offensive side of the ball ready to go. I mean, it's an offensive league, as we've said. So they have that locked down. Now they've got to get the defensive side. So I think maybe in free agency and the draft might be a little bit more likely because you look at the trade deadline, you get what you get. not everybody's going to be coming knocking at your door saying, "Hey, let's make a trade." It's just whoever's available or what's available. So I think maybe free agency in the draft is going to be more likely as they look to become a more defensive-minded team as well. So finally, when looking at exciting young teams in the NBA, approximately where would you rank the Pacers? There's a lot of young teams. We see obviously the biggest example right now being the Oklahoma City Thunder. So where would you rank the Pacers in terms of teams that you're like, this team can be a threat for a while, they're young, they're not going anywhere. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think they're going anywhere because they have a young lead guard and one who fits the modern game quite well in Halliburton. He's a volume 3-point shooter, really good off the dribble passer, variety of ways he can impact the game. They also have a good co-star in Pascal Siakam. I tend to think that the way that they are built just offensively, if we look at like their shooting and their shot diet, they take a lot of shots that are in the gray zone, is what I would call it. They don't take a ton of threes. They don't get to the rim a ton. They take a lot of shots in the mid range. And to their credit, they're really, really effective in the mid range. They do boost the league's fifth ranked effective field goal percentage, so they're quite efficient in what they do. But I think just analytically, they're probably losing the battle of efficiency when you put them up against more high grade talent, like the Celtics of the world, like maybe the Clevelands of the world, the things like that. So I do think there is a ceiling on this team, the way that they're currently constructed. I think you need more volume shooting. I think you need to slow the game down a little bit and really get your wing defense deep and developed. But I do think that this is a talented team that in a weak Eastern Conference can certainly play its way up into the middle of that playoff picture and give their city some excitement for years to come. But if you're looking for championship equity, I still think they're a step or two short.
Yeah, some interesting points there. And like you said, with like the weak Eastern Conference, I mean, obviously in the West, they'd be pretty down there. But in the Eastern Conference right now, they are the fourth seed as of this recording. So I think there is some potential. Right now, they'd probably be facing a team like, I don't know, like Orlando or maybe the Knicks, depending on where you go, the Bucks. So you're going to be facing one of these more veteran teams if you get New York or Milwaukee. So we could possibly see maybe another run this year. Maybe not the Eastern Conference Finals. Just I'm not saying we're going to turn off injuries like this is NBA 2K or something, but you never know. Maybe I could see like a second round appearance for them being their ceiling for now, unless they get some more players that just tighten up that defense or tighten up the efficiency. So that'll be something to look forward to for them. But I do think they are one of the more interesting and exciting teams in the NBA right now. So, Austin, thank you for taking your time to make an appearance here, and hopefully we can get you back on soon.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Let's go to our low light, the Atlanta Hawks. Can the Atlanta Hawks do anything right? Atlanta is 27-31 and 8th in the East. It seems like no matter who's on their roster, the Hawks struggle to solidify themselves as a contender. Trae Young is the team's bright spot, putting up 24 points, 3.1 rebounds, and a league-high 11.5 assists per game. Their only notable accomplishment of late was their run to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2021, where they lost to the eventual champion Milwaukee Bucks. Atlanta won the NBA draft lottery last season and chose Zachary Rissache from France. A starter in all but 2 games in his rookie year, he averages about 11 points in 24 minutes. The DeJounte Murray experiment didn't work, resulting in a trade to New Orleans. Dyson Daniels has been a gift from that trade as he leads the NBA with 3.1 steals per game. Veterans DeAndre Hunter and Bogdan Bogdanovic were traded at the deadline to Cleveland and the LA Clippers respectively. There have always been rumors floating around about Young's time in Atlanta potentially being up and the occasional Photoshop of him in a Lakers uniform before Luka Doncic was sent there. This Hawks roster is currently not set up to compete for a championship or even a first-round series. We'll see if they can make more moves soon. Their next game is tomorrow, Wednesday, February 26th at 7:30 p.m. They will be in Miami to play the Heat. Let's head over to our random stat. March 2nd, 1962. A date that stands in NBA lore and a date that will be coming this Sunday. This is the date of Wilt Chamberlain's iconic 100-point game. For those of you that don't know this story or just want to hear it again, the Philadelphia Warriors, the current-day Golden State Warriors, and New York Knicks squared off on March 2nd, 1962 at Hershey Sports Arena in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Chamberlain proceeded to drop 100 points and 25 rebounds on 36 of 63 shooting. Shockingly, he was 28 of 32 or 87.5% from the foul line. His free throw average in 1961-62 was 61.3%. Chamberlain also played the entire 48 minutes, which wasn't unusual because he averaged 48.5 minutes per game that year. Yeah. The Warriors won 169-147, even though 3 Knicks players had 30-plus points. The game, unfortunately, wasn't televised and no footage has been recovered. Only audio from the fourth quarter remains. Some Bozo fans, and I emphasize Bozo, think this legendary day was a myth. Scoring 100 points in a single game is only one of the numerous records Chamberlain achieved in his NBA career, including scoring a record 50.4 points per game in that same season. Despite the fact that no one will probably touch this record again, it's still an amazing feat in league history. Finally, let's go to Game of the Week. For this week's Game of the Week, let's go with the Minnesota Timberwolves at LA Lakers. This game is on Thursday, February 27th at 10:30 p.m. The Lakers have won 8 of their last 10, and they appear to be gaining a rhythm with new acquisition Luka Doncic. This was evident in their Saturday smackdown over the Nuggets, a team that has given them fits in the playoffs in recent years. Meanwhile, Minnesota is trying to make up ground in the West. They're tied with the Clippers for the 6th seed to escape the play-in tournament. The Timberwolves are currently dealing with injuries to Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, and Dante DiVincenzo. That is certainly not a list of players you want to see on the injury report. You also don't want anyone on the injury report for that matter. However, Minnesota kept it close with the conference-leading Thunder on Sunday. It'll be a battle of Doncic and LeBron James versus Anthony Edwards. Give me the Lakers 116-108. Well, that's all the time we have for today. If you haven't already, make sure to follow me on social media. I have 2 X or Twitter accounts and 2 Instagram accounts. The podcast accounts are under @Diehlman_NBA for both X and Instagram. My personal X account is @LarryDiehlman18, and my personal Instagram is @Mr_Sports18. They're also in the description on Buzzsprout, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you to Austin Krell for being our guest this week on the podcast. Remember, you can follow him on X and Instagram @NBA Krell. And don't forget to spread the word about Diehlman at halftime. See you next time, fellow Hoops fans.